Hi, I'm James Verdier, and welcome to the American Institute of Biological Sciences BioScience Talks, which is a forum for integrating the life sciences. Today, we're very fortunate to be joined by Thyaga Nandagopal, who's the Division Director for the Innovation and Technology Ecosystems Division in the recently established Directorate of Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships at the National Science Foundation. He joined me to give us a view into the new TIP Directorate, as it's called, its priorities and programs, and some of the collaboration opportunities that might even be available to our listeners. So with no further ado, let's go to the interview. Dr. Nandagopal, thank you very much for joining me today.
Happy to be here.
Okay, so I was hoping you could tell me a little bit about, the directorate, just to get us started. When was it stood up, and what gap is it perceived to fill that wasn't filled by previous NSF directorates?
And the National Science Foundation set up this new directorate, the Directorate of Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships, which we call the TIP Directorate, in March 2022, which is about 7 months ago now, roughly. And the mandate for setting this up, came from multiple sources, but most notably, the multiple bills passed in Congress that specifically called on the United States and the National Science Foundation to increase its activities with respect to translating the outcomes of research that we fund in the labs into impactful activities that society can benefit from. So what we call as translation or ideas to impact or lab to market. So there are many different terms that are used here, right? And that's in some sense our primary mission that we have been mandated to accomplish, right? NSF has always taken a lot of pride in seeing the results of its research investments come to the marketplace, right? The internet, the wireless that we all enjoy today, right? The smartphones that we use today have all been made possible because of NSF's foundational investments in R&D in a range of disciplines. And that investment translation, right, that has always happened, has happened organically. It's not because there are some folks who are dedicated to pursuing this as their career goal, go out and do this, right? And what we are trying to do now in this new directorate is to help change that a little bit and speed it up a little bit, right? So we want to scale it and make it happen much more pervasively across a range of disciplines on a more structured basis, so that we can see more and more of these lab outcomes that have the potential to impact our human lives in a significant, meaningful way happen much faster.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, speaking as a layperson, this is something that always happens, to my view, behind the scenes. So I don't know exactly what that might entail. What we're exposed to is lay people, members of the general public, is typically the lab work that we're aware of. We know about the publications, we read about them in the media, and then we also know about things when they come to market, but we never see what happens in between. So I'm kind of wondering if you could tell us a little bit about some of the programs within the directorate, and kind of how they'll help technologies and innovations make that leap into the marketplace or into our lives, as it were.
Absolutely. I think, this is one of our major efforts that we are trying to now spin up. I can talk about some of our existing programs that we have inherited into this effort. So one example is the Small Business Innovation Research Program, the SBIR program. Many of your viewers may have heard this as SBIR, STTR, both dealing with small business support and technology translation efforts. And this program, which is now actually a government-wide effort, many agencies have their own versions of SBIR programs, was started by the NSF in the late 70s, the mid to late 70s. We started it, and it became such a successful model of enabling translation that the rest of the federal government started picking it up. So, if anybody who has a business idea, they set up a startup and they want to obtain initial support, they want to come to they can't come to NSF and apply to this SBIR program. NSF will give them money, which is non-dilutive capital. What does it mean? Non-dilutive capital means in exchange for giving money to support a startup, the government or NSF does not take any stake in that partner in that. venture, right? The founder keeps the entire equity themselves, so they can continue to grow the startup, right, while keeping the equity for themselves, and then be in a much stronger position when they go out eventually to raise more funds, because they would have matured the technology that they're trying to demonstrate. They've done market analysis, they've done validation, and prototyping that they can use to raise a much bigger capital that they can use to later on scale up the business, hire more employees, and so forth, right? Gain more markets and so on. But that is one program that has been highly successful, and has been replicated across multiple federal agencies. Another example I would say in this lab to market space is the so-called Innovation Core program, the I-Core program. This program started out in 2012, so we just completed 10 years. And what we do in this program is teach budding entrepreneurs, whether it's students or faculty members, to ask the critical questions about the idea that they think is viable, whether it's viable to become a company on its own. Can they make a business out of this? We teach them market research, how to engage in asking the critical questions. Often people are blinded by the value of their own invention. They say, oh my God, the invention I have is so great. People should see the benefits of this without having to think hard about it. But it's not always the case. And they are challenged as part of this activity, this I-Core activity. It's a 6-month activity. They have to go interview and talk to many, many potential customers and stakeholders to understand whether what they think is the market is really the market. And many of them actually realize that they have to pivot into something else. What they thought was, the use cases may not be the ones, but they end up discovering something new along the way. We have trained hundreds of teams, like I said, probably thousands of teams now, to go through this process. Many of them have gone on to launch successful startups, and some of them have been bought by other bigger companies, and some of them have gone IPOs, and in very big successful ways. The return on investment has been huge on this program, just to show the kind of both training the budding entrepreneur to how to think like an entrepreneur, and then once they decide to make the jump and engage in the activity of starting a company, we provide them with the Small Business Innovation Research Program, the SBIR support, to take them through a stage, the initial stage, which is the hardest part for an entrepreneur, where they don't have the resources or the money to actually gain their footing, have a stable product that they can demonstrate and win customers and build a market, and then scale it up through venture capitalists and other financing, right? So this is one way of supporting them. This is what we call like the translational part of our activity. Another set of programs that we are trying to do now is something called convergence, right? Showing how to do convergent research. So let's take, for example, the blue economy, right? People talk about oceans and rivers as this next big frontier, the untapped frontier in terms of economic benefit that we sit on, but we don't really do well to synergistically utilize. Now, we brought together teams of biologists, computer data scientists, engineers, and material scientists together to look at the problem of how do we utilize this blue economy in a sustainable fashion. We want to, we don't want to make the mistakes of overfishing or over farming and spoil the resource. But what kind of knowledge resources and engineering tools and new materials do we need to bring to the table to have a sustainable fishing industry, to have a sustainable aquaculture, for example, right? So we are bringing teams of scientists to solve this problem, right? And they are expected to work with the local industry in the area to make sure that the solutions they are coming up are actually practical and implementable, right? And when they are given 3 years to actually demonstrate a working solution, right? So we take the first 9 months to have them form a team and coach them in how to get past their cultural mindsets, the barriers that they may have. An academic may think of a problem only a certain way, and the industry person may speak a slightly different language. Again, even within academics, different disciplines may speak different languages. And we want them to actually get past those barriers that can prevent them from effectively communicating across each other, what we call as team science, right? We teach them how to coordinate and collaborate effectively, how to do market research, how to present themselves, how to go market the solution and pitch the solution to stakeholders effectively. And after putting them through the rigor of that training, I'll give them 3 years to go out there and develop a solution.
That makes sense, and I think particularly for the the blue economy, I think we can understand that. But what other areas are the convergence accelerators kind of looking at applying this sort of team science sort of principle?
So the convergence accelerator has not just invested in this what I call the network blue economy track, but there are also other tracks ranging from open knowledge networks, AI and the future of work, to quantum technology. We have trust and authenticity in communication networks, and building secure data communication networks, which is a collaboration that we have undertaken with the Department of Defense. So these are the some of the range of projects that we are taking on. So that's a big set of what we call as interdisciplinary research, teaching people how to do this. So with an eye towards translation to practice. So that's something that we are engaging in right now. And not only that, so this is something that we are hoping to scale further, right? So every year we announce new tracks, and this is the kind of activity that we want the community to stay tuned to and be ready for to apply. Because for example, even now we have food and nutrition security as one of the topics that we are looking at proposals for, and we are also looking at novel materials, right? We have upcoming workshops, ideation workshops that are being planned that involve chemical sensing, for example, again, more artificial intelligence related topics. So there's a range of topics that we are always trying to spin up, and we would encourage the community to think about how to stay engaged and stay plugged in to this topic, right? Now, building on all of these, so I talked about how we are teaching in this new directorate researchers to engage in use-inspired translational research. How do we work across boundaries to do this? And then we teach them how to be entrepreneurs. And then once they know and decide to be an entrepreneur, we teach them how to launch a business and support them. What we are now really trying to pull together in one big umbrella effort that encompasses all of this and more is this NSF Regional Innovation Engines program called the NSF Engines. So this is our brand new effort. This is our flagship program. Biggest awards that I think NSF has made, that's not an infrastructure award, $160 million over 10 years for each award, right? And this would go to a region and a regional group of entities that will collaborate together to engage in the entire gamut of use-inspired R&D leading to innovation, which leads to business creation and startups and the like, and intellectual property being generated. And these startups will then employ people who are in the region, who are trained to fulfill the jobs that these startups create. So it will encompass not just the values of use-inspired R&D and business creation, but also focus on workforce development, right? So we want them to kind of look at the virtuous cycle of businesses growing in the region, building on the innovations coming from the region, and then investing back into the region, into the same universities and R&D labs that help them succeed. So create this virtual cycle that will significantly amplify the economic growth of the region. So think of the Silicon Valleys and the Bostons and the Pittsburgh and the Austin, right? How they are today. So we want to recreate similar instances all across the country.
Yeah, so you have places where you've got excellent workforces, people who are willing and able to engage in this sort of high value labor, but they have yet to become a hub of sorts for innovation and that kind of thing. And this sort of program is a way to light the spark there and get things moving.
Exactly. So the way I'd like to say this is there are pieces that are out there and there is no connections between them. So we like to be the catalyst that brings them together and activates them to start working together.
That makes sense to me. I was hoping to jump back to the convergence piece for just a moment. Our audience is going to largely be, biologists or those who are interested in biology. And as you were speaking about some of the, programs and initiatives, bells rang in my head a few times about things that we've covered and discussed both on this podcast and in the pages of BioScience. And I'm wondering, what advice you would give to those who might be in some of those fields who had similar bells ringing in their minds, if they were looking to get involved in these types of programs.
Yeah. So number one, I think stay engaged with our efforts by signing up to our mailing list. Right. So on our website, we have a link on our sidebars that the people can sign up. It's a simple and easy way to stay plugged into all the opportunities that are coming up. And because we are a new directorate, I will want to emphasize that what you are seeing, what I've described so far, is just our starting point. And this is what we started out with, and we have a lot more to offer. Right? Congress, with the signing of the CHIPS and Science Act, has authorized. Again, authorized means they have indicated a willingness to provide support for a big chunk of the efforts that we would like to do. Right? And we are hopeful that it will be followed up with appropriations, which is the actual budget allocations for this directorate. Right, and when those funds come about, we have a slew of programs lined up that will benefit the entire scientific R&D community to pursue what I call as use-inspired, impactful research.
Okay, and I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit about use-inspired, impactful research and its potentially complementary role to basic research, because I know that there's always a little bit of fear among some in the science community that the role of basic research will be kind of pushed to the side, by these sort of translational type of activities. Is that the case, or is this something that needn't really be worried about? It's more of a complementary sort of thing.
Right. So I think that's a great question, right? Often people ask this question, well, is TIP taking away money from foundational science? And my idea is no, it's not, right? In fact, it acts in complement to the funding that's going on there. So it is important to note that NSF, Congress in its CHIPS and Science Act legislation has indicated that NSF as a whole should benefit greatly from this increase. Right. And yes, we are receiving a bigger share of that increase, mainly because we are new and we have a lot more programs to spin up compared to established directorates that have big budgets and ongoing programs. But Congress has essentially indicated a desire to have everybody see their budgets raised, both for foundational research and for the use-inspired and translational activities that TIP will support. Right. So that's point number one. Right. And again, the public statements that the director of NSF has made also speak to that. They will essentially, say the same thing, that NSF sees both of these pieces as two sides of a coin, and one shouldn't exist in isolation without the other, right? And cannot, ideally, right? What I would also like to say is, if you are a scientist who is used to publishing papers, there comes a point. Now, I used to be a scientist myself, right? And there's always a point in your life where you say, is this all there is to it? Is life just about graduating students, teaching classes, and writing papers? Right? So at some point you want to say, I want to have, many of them have told us that they really, especially those who have gone through ICOR, especially come back and said, I wish I had done this training when I started my career as a faculty member, because I can imagine myself having done much more impactful stuff that I can claim or I can see in practice today than what I have done so far in my life. Right? I want everyone to, we are not asking everyone to change their mindset that, oh yeah, you shouldn't be doing foundational research, right? Everybody should be doing this and that, right? We are saying that give translational research and use-inspired research a chance. Don't think that foundational research is the only goal of doing R&D, right? At some point, the taxpayers who are underwriting this research funding, they want to see the benefits flow through them. Right? Modern life is essentially a result of those benefits eventually making its way to the public. And I think we can do a much better job of it if everybody just took a few minutes as they think about the research and say, in what way can I make this research useful to society? And that's all we're asking. Just take a pause, have the thought, and maybe it's not the faculty member themselves who are having the idea or the inspiration or the motivation to do that. Maybe they can motivate the student to pursue this. After all, you train a PhD student, but not every PhD student actually becomes a faculty member. A very small minority of PhDs actually become faculty members. Vast majority of them go into industry, do other things, right? And yet, most of our PhD training is about how to become a faculty member. And what we are saying here is, we are here, TIP, the new directorate, to help demonstrate that there are other ways to train people in use-inspired R&D, and perhaps that training can inspire more people to pursue what I call as impactful ways to deliver their science outcomes to society at large.
No, that makes quite a bit of sense, and I think it speaks well to the drive that seems to be a force in many scientists' careers, that they want to change the world, they want to have an impact, as it were, and this seems like a potential set of pathways for them to actually do that.
Absolutely, and again, if we are successful in training a generation of students, right? Let's say if half of the students who graduate today understand what it means to start a company, or they can see a way for their research to be benefiting to society, and they can see that pathway as they're doing their PhD. And then some of them decide to pursue that pathway upon graduation. We would be an unqualified success, right? We'll be a huge success. Our mission would have been accomplished.
Right. Well, that sounds like a very exciting prospect, and I think it gives our listeners quite a lot to think about. And I would just like to thank you very much for joining me today. I think we've got a lot for them to chew on. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And again, I would encourage all of your listeners to tune in, stay connected to us by signing up to our website, to a mailing list, and watch our space. And we are happy to come and talk to your community, to community meetings, and we are happy to engage in any way that you feel is helpful to spread this word. That we all have to do a little bit from our side to bring our labs, to the marketplace.
That sounds excellent. Thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that concludes this episode of BioScience Talks. Just a reminder, the journal BioScience is published by Oxford University Press on behalf of the American Institute of Biological Sciences and is made possible by the support of our members and donors. Thank you, and talk to you next time.